My name is Joanna. I am 57 years old. My life has not turned out as I planned, but I have accomplished a lot despite the challenges. I have learned to appreciate realism, especially after my dreams and plans collided with reality. In adulthood, I married a second time, and now live in upstate New York where I have my own home. I am grateful for what I have and want to spend the rest of my life honoring those who helped get me here. Work took up most of and it took me a long time to find a partner. But then I met a widower with 2 children. We met at the factory where I worked, and he supplied materials. Eventually, he confessed his love, and we got married. His children, who lost their mother 3 years ago, have taken me in as their own. They call me Mom, and that touches me. I thought the children accepted me because of their longing for their mother, but they have genuinely grown attached to me. My stepchildren grew up without hassle, supporting each other. The stepdaughter showed care by growing up and helping her younger brother. The stepson, though naughty, remained naive and incredibly sweet. This family is my true home, and I am grateful every day to have them. An estrangement gradually developed between me and my children. As my stepdaughter grew up and became a teenager, our relationship changed. One day she came home from school, didn't want to eat, and grudgingly asked a question. "Mom, tell me the truth. Did you marry your father because of his wealth?" "Where did you get such thoughts?" I asked in reply. "Your aunt says it is so," she said. "It was unexpected and hurtful. I had always tried to provide them with everything they needed, choosing quality things so they wouldn't feel inferior to others. But my stepdaughter kept insisting, 'If you really care about us, give me more pocket money so that I don't feel insecure among my peers.' I tried to convince her of my love and care, but her doubts only deepened. 'Please believe me. I love you with all my heart,' I begged. But instead of understanding, she demanded more money to feel equal among her friends. At that time, my husband's business was going through bad times, and I even considered babysitting as our income was at rock bottom. My stepdaughter didn't know this. We were in financial trouble. "If you're short on money, try getting a part-time job," I suggested to her. "Earning money on your own is an important experience." "It's not easy to earn money," she replied resentfully and left, slamming the door. Her behavior changed, and I began to question my parenting method. A few days later, I received a call from the classroom teacher. "Your daughter has been skipping classes and has even become aggressive," she said. "She even demanded money from her classmates. If she doesn't change, I will advise her to leave school." I took the blame for her actions, apologized, and made amends. But the problems continued, and my son complained that I was paying more attention to his sister. As a result, the stepdaughter was suspended from school. "I wanted to help by trying to earn money," she said. "But you need to finish school," I replied. "Adult life is hard." My husband and I kept convincing her to go back to school. Eventually, my stepdaughter realized the importance of education and decided to see school through. Although her grades left much to be desired, she said she was going to increase her income after graduation and asked us not to interfere. She then moved out to live with a friend. After she left, my stepson became the center of attention. He apparently decided that disobedience would draw more attention to him and started skipping classes and socializing with questionable company. My husband tried to send him to university and even found home teachers, but my stepson could not get in. It pained me to see that none of the children had continued their college education. I felt guilty, as if I hadn't done everything possible. My husband and I tried to give them everything we could. Now, when both ended up out of college, All I could do was sigh about their choices. The stepson expressed a desire to be independent, but spent his time on the street. When the kids happened to meet at home, arguments would start between them. You say you earn, but you are always asking for money, reproached one to be independent. You have to provide for yourself. I said, "How can you reproach me?" They replied, "At least I don't cause trouble, unlike you in school," said the stepson. "You only finished school because of me and Dad. Why do you keep complaining without doing anything good?" They argued, and even the money they received from home became a subject of quarrels. "Why do you follow me all the time?" My husband and I suffered seeing our children fighting. We were concerned about how they were doing even when we didn't see them. Often I would go away to my sick aunt's house to get a break from domestic problems. But even at a distance, I couldn't stop thinking about the children. It seemed to me that I was largely to blame for their problems. It was sad to see my once angelic children lose their way. I didn't know where they got the money from, but they always sent gifts for the holidays. Boxes of apples and meat. I was worried they might cause some more problems, but thankfully nothing bad happened. I decided to be grateful for what I have. Years later, both of my stepchildren got married. My stepdaughter quickly became a mom, and we were happy to welcome our first grandchild. But their weddings were not easy. They chose wedding dates a month apart, and we weren't able to help them financially as much as they wanted. My husband and I decided we would spend the same amount on each wedding. The now grown children started comparing wedding preparations, trying to see who would get more. "Mom, are you buying more expensive furniture for your brother because he's a son?" complained my stepdaughter. "Are you taking revenge on me for childhood offenses?" But that wasn't it. It was hard to budget to buy her wedding dress and furniture for the same money as her brother. Since the weddings were so close together, it made us very tired. Yesterday, your brother raised the question, "Why are you sending him to a better place for his honeymoon? Are you going to torture us to death?" I'm sick of it. That's enough. If you continue to behave like this, we won't pay your bills anymore. Take care of your own desires. Dad and I are not your wallet. I was so tired and annoyed that I rudely replied. After that, they stopped yelling and complaining, got married quietly and started but soon the house became noisy again. Despite all their caprices, they remained our children and came home for holidays. As when the house was filled with the voices of children, it came alive. My husband was happy that day, especially after a couple of drinks. "This is what family is all about," he said. "No matter how hard it was before, it's wonderful that we're all together now. We want to live in peace." "You talk a lot after wine," I remarked. "The important thing is that our children are happy." Then the stepson asks, "How will you distribute the inheritance so there are no conflicts?" The stepdaughter added, "I will not allow you to give him more just because he is your son." At our weddings, I didn't argue and left it as it was. "But you gave more to Steve," she said. Her stepson objected. "What are you talking about? You got everything you wanted. Why are you only remembering it now? Mom and Dad spent the same on us and even let you check the bills. Are you really willing to go that far for an inheritance?" As a result, they started fighting again. My heart was breaking with pain. I was ashamed in front of my children, their spouses and grandchildren. I wanted to leave and hide. My husband was furious and yelling as hard as he could. "What kind of behavior is this at a family celebration? Why are you acting like this when I've already given you so much money?" He resented. "I don't understand why you're demanding more. After all, it's my money." My stepdaughter tried to justify herself, saying it wasn't fair to her. "You're only doing everything for Mom, ignoring our grievances." My husband couldn't stand it and left. The stepson blamed his sister for everything, threw a tray of fruit at her, and a fight broke out. They shouted at each other, got into a scuffle. They continued fighting even in the street. When they left, the police arrived after a neighbor called. I was so angry that I told them, "Don't come here again. I don't want to see your gifts for the holidays. Don't embarrass us. Leave now." That day was horrible. I didn't yet know that it was the beginning of the disaster that happened shortly after that day. The end of the year was approaching, and my husband and I were planning a quiet dinner. The kids were no longer coming over for the vacations. My husband was busy at work, so we decided to celebrate New Year's Eve at a restaurant. But my husband, who is always punctual, was over an hour late. I called him, but he didn't answer. Eventually, I left the restaurant and headed home. Then I got a call. "Are you a relative of Mr. Bertrand King? This is a member of the hospital emergency room staff. Mr. King collapsed in the street due to breathing problems. His condition is now critical." I panicked, caught a cab, and rushed to the hospital. But by the time I arrived, my husband was already dead. He was on his way from work to meet me and fell down clutching his chest, as the restaurant was not far from his place of work, and he was walking by when it happened. I couldn't understand why it happened. There was an emptiness inside me at the realization that he had worked until the very last minutes of his life. Sitting at the funeral in a state of shock, my stepdaughter put some documents in front of me and demanded, "You lived well, thanks to your father. Don't be selfish and greedy. Sign over the property to us. Otherwise, we won't leave it that way." They looked at me as if they wanted to eat me. I could understand their attitude towards me, but not the way they started fighting, arguing over the division of their father's property when he had just died. I cried. I felt so sorry for my husband, who didn't know how greedy his children could be. He walked away, regretting snapping at them. "I'll do whatever you want. Just wait a few days. This is your father. Do you have to act like this on his last day? How can you do that when he loved you so much?" But my stepdaughter didn't even blink and scolded me. "You sucked the blood out of my father, drove a wedge between us to keep us apart." I had nothing to say in response. After a crazy funeral, I got the estate settled the way my husband and I had planned. I agreed not to deal with the company, and I decided to spend the rest of my life in a house that was full of his memories. But even through an attorney, I was unable to keep the house. The children decided to divide the proceeds of the house that belonged to my husband as well. They did this without my participation, and I was forced to leave the house. At first, I stayed with friends, but it was uncomfortable for long periods of time. One night, I was looking for a place to sleep and fell asleep on a bench at the railroad station. When I woke up in the morning, volunteers from the shelter were handing out food to the homeless. I got in line to get some food, too, and learned that they were short-handed. I offered my help. "Grandma, you are so fast and skillful. Come and visit us next time. Will you help again?" He asked me. I said yes. And so I started helping at the shelter, delivering groceries, cooking meals, washing dishes while I lived there. I felt at peace that I had found a shelter, but at night, a year later, as I was getting ready to distribute food at the train station, a neatly dressed gentleman approached me. "Excuse me, aren't you Mrs. King?" "I'm Howard Parker, attorney at law." Suddenly, I heard a voice calling me Mom. It was my stepdaughter standing behind him. Next to him was my stepson as well. "How did you find me?" I asked. "Mom, you should have told us where you were going. Let's go home now." My stepdaughter grabbed my wrist, then my stepson grabbed my other hand as well. "What are you saying, Mom? Come with me." They started to argue, and I was caught between them. I didn't understand what was going on and turned to the lawyer. "How is Mrs. Butler, your father's paternal aunt?" She had died and left all her property to me. This was the same aunt I had cared for whenever I had free time, even in spite of my circumstances. I couldn't afford to visit her when my affairs took a turn for the worse. But she left me an unexpected gift. The lawyer came to find me. I turned to my children, and after some searching, they found me. When the children found out about the sudden inheritance, they started arguing over which one of them would take me in. Don't mind me now. How long have I lived alone? Both of you have ignored me all these years. All of a sudden, you wish for me to move in with you. Remember what you said. Didn't you accuse me of draining your father and sowing discord between you and him? Why is there such a change in your feelings now? Would you have been as persistent in your search for me, had it not been for my sudden inheritance? Mother, you're a man of considerable ability, and I'm sure you'll find a decent place to live wherever you end up. If you cared so much, why didn't you ever call? I know you're angry with my sister, but please forgive her. My stepson intervened, taking my hand. The stepdaughter pushed her brother away and said, "Mom, you know me. Remember how well we used to get along before? I miss those times so much. Let's try to start over. I'll do my best." They both pulled me in different directions, each trying to drag me down with. Then the lawyer intervened. "The decision is Mrs. King's alone. Mrs. Butler has left you her house, and you may go there immediately." I resolutely released myself from their embrace. There's no need to pretend. I don't need your concern. The thought of money makes me sick. I tried to be good for you, but you rejected me, accusing me of greed. And now that money has come, you're drawn to me again. How much money could justify such a fuss? It turns out my distant relative left me 3 buildings in New York, substantial savings in the bank, a house and stocks. Even a simple calculation of the market value of these buildings exceeds $200 million. Now you're fighting over the right to be with me, aren't you? Yes, it's true. Even while my husband was alive, you didn't hold your tongue, said things you shouldn't have. So what, now that I'm alone? Am I going to be an even more vulnerable target for you? Let me tell you right here and now, you will not get a dime from me. Remember that once and for all. I said it in anger, and they stood silent, not saying a word. I sold all the buildings I got and gave the money to the orphanage, which gave me work and shelter. Now I spend my days at my late aunt's house. I live off the inheritance she left me and continue to volunteer at the same shelter where I met my current spouse. My children try to contact me from time to time. I no longer want to see them. I have decided that I will leave any remaining money to the shelter after I die. Until then, I'm going to live comfortably, develop my career, and work with my husband, so I don't have any more adversity. Now that I've spoken my mind, I feel much better.